Thank you very much. Cheers. Okay, so over the next 4 hours, I hope to explain to you about... As I mentioned there, Steve Bunce is a boxing commentator, and late on Saturday night, I get lots of tweets from people who think I am the boxing commentator, and they think I have an opinion about it. And I say, no, you don't want me, Steve Bunce. You want Big Daddy Bunce on Twitter. But I use Twitter quite a lot, and the reason why I'm going to talk to you tonight about Mr. Ben here is because when I first started using Twitter, I was going into schools and being lots of different characters, which is similar to the children's character Mr. Ben. So those of you who can remember this is Mr. Ben Street.
It was Saturday morning in Festive Road. Coal was being delivered, and boys were playing with wooden swords. Everything was very ordinary. This is an ordinary street. At number 52, the postman arrived with a letter. Number 52 is Mr. Ben's house, and Mr. Ben was at the front door to meet the postman. The letter was an invitation to a fancy dress party. Mr. Ben wasn't really very fond of parties, but he did like fancy dress.
So Mr. Ben is this character, one moment, who likes to be plugged in. And Mr. Ben is a character who I like to use the hero's journey in a lot of the presentations I do to talk about the sort of the journey that we take. And we're on. And he describes the ordinary world. So he described that he lived in an ordinary street. So what's the ordinary world within education? Well, firstly, I'll show you what the effect of music can have on people. You see how music changes the scene dramatically? You see, doesn't it seem darker already? There you go. Anyway, he lived in an ordinary world, and he was called to adventure by this invitation which would say, come along and come now to this fancy dress party. However, initially he said he doesn't really like parties, he was going to refuse it, but then he decides to go anyway. And that's what the hero's journey follows, this idea of being called and then finally refusing it and then going. And meeting a mentor. Now in the Mr. Ben stories, you meet the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper could be, for example, in education, could be the teacher. The teacher could be actually the facilitator, or you could even argue it's Vygotsky. So the idea is he's finding ways to move him forwards to within his own proximal development. And he crosses the threshold, he goes out on his adventure. So, researching professions in the 1970s, echoing very much what we've been talking about today, is what did people do in the past and what are the jobs that our children's going to be in the future? Well, looking at the jobs for Mr. Ben, these are the type of typical 1970 jobs. So, hunter, cook, caveman, balloonist, zookeeper, diver, wizard, cowboy, etc. But what's it going to be like nowadays? What sort of jobs are we talking about? Are we talking about the jobs that children are going to be doing in a few years' time? Or, what I'd like to say is, what can they do to actually create the jobs they want to have? So, in 2010, you might do the BBC class test. So then there's now 7 different categories rather than just working class, middle class and upper class. Also, literature is a lot harsher nowadays. So you can't be an astronaut, it's just not realistic. But we've had the Next Gen report. The Next Gen report was telling us about, again, how we want to be more creative, how we want more graphic designers. Also Google, they say they lament the lack of quality graduates that coming out of the university because they wanted more computer literate pupils. Seth Godin, a business guru, is talking about school. School should change, he says. Get rid of tests, flip their classroom so that they're doing the homework during the daytime, doing the learning on the night time. Also, we've got Shut Down or Restart from the Royal Academy, Royal Society. They're talking about, again, what should be the future of computing in schools. Now I tell my daughters, finish your homework because people in India and China are starving for your jobs. So, we want our children to be digitally literate. We need them to be able to know that when they're using an iPhone, about how to use that. There you go. And also we want head teachers to be digitally literate when they send out messages to the children. Okay. And when they actually become the computer programmers and designers of the future, you want them to design something which is like more straightforward. So, for example, don't click OK to cancel and cancel to continue. And finally, you want them to know about when autocorrect is correct.
Hi guys, can I be your friend? Can I write on your wall?
No.
Will you be my friend? But I write on all my friends' walls.
I got to know you before I was your friend.
All my friends have got like 180 friends. I've only got 2. Yeah. Would it help if maybe like you looked at my photos? That one's with 2 like really pretty girls. Like that's my ex. I was in a relationship with her, but I've changed my status now. Yeah. What's your relationship status?
Single.
Oh, good. Cool. I like that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
I like your jacket.
Thank you.
I like your sunglasses. Do you like that? Do you want to comment on it? I like your Ray-Bans. Can I poke? 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 No? What, poke? What, you want to poke?
Can I poke you?
Yeah, you can poke me if you want.
Yeah.
I mean, how am I... No, dude, seriously, just be my friend. If I just show you these pictures in this photo album... What's your name on Twitter?
Mark the Legal.
Oh, so you use Twitter?
Yeah.
I'm going to follow you.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I'm going to follow you.
Right, okay.
Wicked, cool.
Right.
Alright, thanks a lot, nice one. Thanks,
Okay.
guys. Yeah. Wicked. Bye, cheers. Wicked. Alright, thank you. That's great. Wicked. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Oh, you're actually following me.
I'm following you.
Should we go?
Okay.
Okay.
Should we go or?
Okay. So that was an advert for a play, but again it's thinking about what language do we use? Are the children digitally literate? Are they understanding the world they live in?
Status update. Can't wait for my fabulous evening at the E&O. Lol. Ruffle. Do you like? What?
Okay, but again it's very serious because, for example, with the police commissioner, the youth police commissioner here, again her Twitter timeline and causing troubles there. Again, I feel she should have been better advised by the police when she took on the job. But the call to adventure, what can we do to help the children? Well, for example, we've mentioned games already this evening, and using different games, we think about how they can inspire and engage. Here's an example of, again, when quite often people see the DS and children playing on the game there, they look like they're completely engaged in it, but actually here it's writing messages and sending messages and communicating in that sense. This is my nephew. He only likes playing Guitar Hero if somebody's watching with him because he wants to share his scores. It's not a single event, it's where he wants to be social. And here we have a Norwegian boy who saved his sister from a moose because he'd played that in a game, he'd learnt from within the game, and he knew that when a moose attacks you, play dead and they'll leave you alone. So all these things we actually can learn within the games, that these skills can be taken on board. Pac-Man again can be found in real life. this is a Frenchman who likes dressing up as a Pac-Man going into different public places. But again, it's the influence of games in our everyday lives. So this year last year rather, we did a project on the Olympic Games, thinking about how we could use these to influence the children to learn more about different areas. They learned a lot about London, they learned a lot about the Olympic Games. For example, here's the 100-metre sprint.
Athletics, track, 100-meter sprint, one player. Here we go.
So using the game as an influence, as an idea, they did the 100-metre sprint. So then they actually had to do it, obviously then gathering the times. They collaborated on a spreadsheet, they put it in different times, so linking it to maths. We also linked it to science, looking at the heart rates. And we also did it, look at some different apps, looking at how far they travel. So they came up with this hypothesis: do you actually use more energy playing the game than you do in real life running around?
On your mark. Get set.
So we linked this to real life. They then went outside and they measured out 100 metres and they tried this out to see whether they used more energy, looked at the heart rate and other things. And then we thought, well, how can we evaluate this? We started using habits of mind as thinking about how they use games, how can you evaluate the use of the games, for example, in there. Things like thinking about questions you might use, thinking about applying in past knowledge to it, especially persisting came in there. Other habits of mind, for example, finding humour often came into it as well. Linking on to fencing, would you let this boy have a real sword? So you notice at the top there's the score, so the score when the first person gets to 10, they win. So the children then took these scores and put them into their maths worksheets. So again, using that to sort of work out the difference, working out the total score. So again, things like striving for accuracy was there. We could identify with the children, get them to think about which skills they were using. Changing the language is another way of learning in there. You can change the game language to German, for example, and it sounds much more assertive. Okay, and then so there's a couple of primary examples. This is a secondary example where we looked at doing operations. The children think about different operations, think about the medical side thing, the health side of it, but also again, how did they work? Well, we had somebody operating the surgeon, as the surgeon standing up there, 2 advisors in the operation, and then 2 other observers looking at how they were using these skills. So again, thinking about how you might use the classroom space in there. So games has been a really good way of actually getting the children engaged, but also looking at lots of other skills and other subjects too. Just released on the iPad is a new game called Hakitsu, which again tries to teach coding through this. It's a free app. You can see up there on the left, it says, for example, you've got things like turn left, light punch, strong punch, in there. So again, it's trying to teach coding through the apps. Minecraft is really taking off in schools at the moment. Here you can see, unfortunately, Mark Power isn't with us, but there's his boys at their console, and they're sort of programming their new world in Minecraft. Here's a complete world which has been created. This is Jurassic Park in Minecraft. You imagine the hours of creative time that's gone into this. So fantastic world's been created by lots of children and collaboratively as well. But also, So lots of other animations being created. But the main way the children are learning is actually not necessarily through a classroom. They're learning by creating and watching videos. They're learning themselves. They're very self-motivated to learn and to share and help each other. Jesse Schell is part of Disney and other game-producing companies. He's he speaks a lot of sense. I like what he says. So Jesse Schell said, actually, at the moment, there's not many games that have actually moved into tears, but films have. He says, in films, we use language like, talk, ask, negotiate. In video games, it's sort of below the neck. It's like kick, run, shoot, jump. So how can we make, for example, games more emotional? How can we make them more literate, say? Another example where we've been looking at languages, we've been using audio note taker, and I'll just come out with this to show you an example of what it looks like. It's a tool which you can put in, either record straight into, or you can actually add an MP3 to it. And you can see how it puts blocks of different phrases in there. So as it plays, it separates up the language into blocks. So we can analyse what the children have been saying. You can then actually colour the different blocks, different colours, if it's, for example, a particular type you'd like to see. So this is Sonnet audio note taker. It also lets us jump around from phrase to phrase with the kids.
One day, two miners named Albert and Ernie were in Merton Colliery. The two had been friends in school and had started working at the pit together some years ago. It was a dark and cold morning, but they were putting the chain was going. Aye, replied Ernie, sweating from the effort of heaving on the chain.
What do you think? The deer making us pull this heavy chain?
Asked Al.
So again, you can jump forward, back and forth within the phrase. It helps with transcribing the words they use, and also helps with us actually sort of listening to different key phrases they might use. So that's just, again, as a way of helping us to analyse, to try and gather some evidence of how the games are having an effect. This morning we talked about knitting and sort of the ideas of how knitting can influence and have some ideas. So we could arm knit this afternoon. We finger knitted this morning. How's that for progression? Okay. So for example, now we're using both arms to knit to make a large scarf. Look at that. But again, learning through YouTube, learning through other examples here.
And then this is where you start.
Fantastic example. This is where they've hacked a knitting machine with an Arduino controller, and now they're using languages to program the knitting machine to make all sorts of different creative things. But what I really like is how they can put in all this text. You could design any jumper you like, put that text on that jumper. So that's knitting. Also, another example is code cards, getting children into coding by using actual bits of cards so it can move around. What it does is it's a glass table, and it can read the cards from the back, and on the screen it then actually makes the program. So again, it's much more tactile that the children can mess around with the program in there. This morning also we described Hackosaurus, which is X-ray goggles from Mozilla. And also we described Thimble as well. And these are great ways of getting the children really engaged in programming and looking behind the web pages. Also, Scratch has been mentioned, and the online version of Scratch 2.0 lets us get engaged here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an example of using Scratch with a tool which helps us to unlock and actually have some inputs as well. And just before I do that, I'm going to mention LiveCode. LiveCode is a bit like HyperCard, which was out years ago. It's just been redone on Kickstarter. And again, it's a more literal way of programming. And I think it's going to be very important in the next couple of years with sort of secondary schools and maybe into higher education as well. This is an example you may have seen before of the piano stairs. Oops. Okay. So by creating a piano stairs a more fun area, that then more people use the stairs. So, but how do we actually access that in school? How can you get children to think, well, that's great for them, they've got all the engineering and all the technology, how can they access it? And what I've got here is something called a makey makey. It's a little card, and I'll show you what it does. So instead of having a keyboard and pressing the spacebar on the keyboard, it's like you can make a circuit. When you make that circuit, it's equivalent of pressing the keyboard, the spacebar. Or by using Play-Doh. So anything which will make a circuit, you can use. And here's our homemade piano stairs.
Hi, I'm Jay.
And I'm Eric. We're graduate students at MIT Media Lab.
We have a dream that everyone is an inventor. So we created Makey Makey to let you invent just by alligator clipping. Alligator clips stuff like bananas to your Makey Makey. When you touch the banana, your computer just thinks you're touching the keyboard. The front has arrow keys, spacebar, and mouse left click. When you're ready for more, flip the Makey Makey over and you've got more keyboard keys and support for the mouse. You can even use the board like an Arduino when you are ready. No programming, no breadboarding. You don't even have to install software. Just plug it in USB.
Order your Makey Makey today and start changing how the world works.
So basically it's like cracking open the keyboard and then being able to make circuits. So here I have my banana, I hold one wire, I make the circuit with the banana, and I can change slides, you see? So, isn't that fantastic? Also, the children enjoy what we do is we give each other high fives by making a human chain. You can make a circuit, see how big the circuit is. So coming into science as well. It's an example of a Makey doll. Makey dolls are quite expensive, but they're fantastic. They can program these dolls a bit like the size of sort of Barbies and Cindy's, like large dolls, but they're very intelligent. But again, how can you get the children to think about those? Well, I'm not going to be able to show you now due to shortage of time, but what we can do is we can link up an Android phone to Scratch. And basically what you have is, as the Android phone goes up and down, it can actually be registered in Scratch and move the character on the screen. Again, I can show you this afterwards if you'd like to see it. I did also have a teddy bear which I'd carefully opened up the bottom to put the phone into, but when I got on the airplane this morning I decided not to bring it with me because I thought bringing a teddy bear with a concealed compartment and a phone wouldn't be a good idea. But it's possible. So again, it's the idea of children, rather than just being able to just play around with the keyboard and what's quite contained, is cracking these things open, get them to make things with wires, get them to use things like phones as well to actually be able to control things as well. Which leads on to sort of the internet things, as we talked before about the toilet, how things are linked together. And for example, all this large data is coming along.
What if the next big thing is...
Instead of having to sift through and organize all the
This is Google Now, which is on Android phones.
All that information is ready at the exact moment you actually need it. Introducing Google Now. Now with Android, one simple swipe gives you the information that is relevant to you.
So Google has all this information about you. They're sort of predicting what you want to do next.
Smart enough to check current traffic conditions and has prepared an alternate route for your commute. Google Now is always one step ahead, so you can feel more confident as you navigate your day. When you're at a subway station, Google Now can tell you what trains are next, find you interesting local places to eat. Is there a good Japanese noodle bar nearby? And when you're in a restaurant, your phone already has the best dishes listed for you. Google Now automatically keeps you updated on your favorite sports teams in real time, just in case you were curious about that no-hitter. With the predictive power of Now, You get just what you need to know, right when you need it.
So just think, if, for example, you regularly get the same bus to work each day and one day you don't get the bus, is it then going to tell, for example, the hospital, you might be ill, go and check on you, go and check and see if you're okay? Or is it just actually you've booked in a holiday? All this information is flying around. So what does actually, you know, how are we going to prepare our children for actually managing all this data? Another example is the little box which is being advertised on TV. It's telemetry to go with your car insurance. So if you don't swerve or brake heavily, you can have cheaper car insurance. Things like Oyster cards, it's mapping your travels every day. It can give you an update of where you've been that week. And also even now business cards can have little trackers in terms of the near field communication, that you have a link to a website as well. So last few examples. The good night lamp is basically a way of actually communicating. So I could have the large lamp, I could give the three small lamps to my 3 friends. When I switch my lamp off at night, their light goes off as well. They know I've gone to sleep. It could be, imagine the sort of, when your parents, you send your children off to university, you could see when they've gone to bed, whether they tell the truth or not, you could see. Things like linking together health or the data about, for example, wireless trackers. This is a set of Wi-Fi scales which recognise you when you stand on them. Okay? I don't think it's got a webcam in there, thankfully, but I think it's got the idea of like, recognising sort of the weight and sort of body fat as well. Things like the fuel band as well, all the software development kit's been opened up to people to start using that technology as well. The happy fork. The happy fork is along the lines of, if you eat too quickly, then you might be gaining too much weight. So it recommends how quickly you should eat. So for example, here we have, in your last meal you had 76 fork servings, 3.1 of them were 3.1 fork servings per minute, 18% were over speed, and you ate for about 26 minutes. All that data is coming out, okay? Things like under the blood testing, so for example, for drugs like chemotherapy, or it could be almost as well for diabetics. The boyfriend pillow isn't on the Internet of Things yet, but there's no reason why it couldn't be. It could be measuring heart rate and other things as well. So all this data is out there. So what we're trying to do with one of the schools we're working with is all this data was just a bit too big to handle. So we started looking at infographics, which is data sorted and presented visually. So they looked at different ways of presenting data. We looked at what's around us. They also then started ripping up newspapers and plates and things and trying to decide what was actually real and what was opinion, what wasn't real.
And we've been cutting out the false beliefs that were only left with truth.
Yeah. My group decided to highlight the truth bits and just leave the rest. And we thought the pictures were more truthful because they were actual evidence. But then the sports side wasn't really that much, it was all opinionated.
Yeah, and in my group, we cut out the admin, and well, here is the big admin, it's all opinion and stuff which we didn't think was true, and we've left things such as the frozen misery, because that's what actually happened to people, it was their lives. Okay,
so again, get them to try and think about how visually could you represent things by tearing them up. So again, they produced some very quick pictograms, picture charts and infographics, and again we've then gone on to the digital versions using things like PictoChart as well. And the sort of last category is really things like 3D printing. Are they not the best pen lids ever, that you can sort of eat your meal as well as write at the same time? But the idea is there's also this world to be wary of. DefCAD is being set up where actually you can download the prints of guns. So what's going to happen next few years when schools start to have, for example, opportunities to use 3D printers? What are people going to print? How do we educate our children about what's coming? Also things like actually using the 3D printer, and Ouya, O-U-Y-A, is a new game console which is open source. So all these things are sort of linking together, so the 3D printing, the new gaming, the sort of the open source, the crowdsourcing. This is scanning, we're using the Xbox Kinect, which is just out, so the software kit is just coming out soon. And then you can make things like Pez heads. Imagine your head on the top of a sweet dispenser. I can see you thinking about it. Okay, but even maybe more powerfully is, for example, here's a cancer victim who had lost part of his face and then reprinting a new part of his face to use as a prosthesis. So again, all these fantastic developments are coming on. This came out just over about 10 days ago, the Play-Doh 3D printer. I was so excited until I realised it was April the 1st and it's not actually possible to get. But imagine if it was though. Imagine you could print out, you design it on the iPad, it makes it out of Play-Doh. So why aren't we doing all these things? What's stopping us? So we can do this. We can be creating courses. We can create the underwater basket weaving course from Coursera.
Hello, my name is Phineas Dunn, Professor of Maritime Anthropology at Syracuse University, and I'm very excited to be teaching a course on a lifelong passion of mine, underwater basket weaving.
Okay, sadly again, another April Fool.
People are aware of the incredible history of wet weave basketry, which many believe was pioneered.
But a great example to use with the kids, talk about, you know, this looks genuine. Everything about it looks genuine. The place looks genuine. Does it sound genuine, what he says?
Awesome history of the Aqua Kamamata, but we will also learn to replicate some of their finest pieces of art, including this beautiful number here, which the Aqua Kamamata referred to as which roughly translated means bowl of riverbed, chalice of Mother Earth.
Okay, so does it seem real? So this is like a piece that was in the New York Times the other week, where basically Tony Ragnar from Harvard Education said, rather than actually saying, we keep saying about what the jobs our children are going to be doing in a few years' time, why don't they actually start inventing the job they'd like to do, looking at the skills, what they're interested in, like in Minecraft, creating these worlds, like using YouTube to create other evidence of things to teach each other. What could they do? And it says like they should be thinking about the job they'd like to do and invent that job rather than waiting to find a job to go for. Which brings us all together. So what could hold us all together? The idea of some sort of context to go with the pedagoggical knowledge. It's nearly 6:30, you're nearly there. And pulling it all together in Mr. Ben. And as I conclude, is he used to finish with a memento at every episode. He pulled it all together. He had a memento to remind him of his experience. Badges are like that. So the idea of a Mr. Ben badge for the different skills he accomplished. Well, things like DIY.org is a great example. My colleague Zoe Ross has been doing lots of work with badges, and also this is a great site where it explains about tasks, and the children actually share their outcomes, what they've made as the challenges they share. Which links us also then nicely to Doug and Mozilla Open Badges, which again is trying to recognise the skills, these soft skills that people value and need, which aren't necessarily accredited through exams. And I like this bit because in there it says you can knit your skills together, which brings us full circle back to knitting and to finish. So, thank you very much.
You
feel alive?
I feel happy of myself.
I feel happy of myself too. What do you got, any words of wisdom? What about for all the other kids trying to learn how to ride their bike? Can you say anything to them?
Everybody, I know you can believe in yourself. If you believe in yourself, you will know how to ride a bike. If you don't, you just keep practicing. You won't get the hang of it right now. If you keep practicing, you will get the hang of it. And then you can get better and better at it as you do it.
Give me some thumbs up.
Thumbs up, everybody!
All right.
Okay. So thank you very much. Thank you. Good night.